All right, guys, welcome back to another video. Today, we're diving into the Las Vegas Raiders and their rough start to the season. Yesterday, they lost their week 1 game against the Chargers, and honestly, I'm pretty frustrated. You might think I'm overreacting, but this one really stings. Let's break it down. The Chargers, a divisional rival, didn't even dominate through the air. Justin Herbert had just 144 passing yards, completing only 17 passes. And get this was the first time in Herbert's career where not a single receiver had over 40 yards, yet they still won. How did the Raiders let this one slip away? I know how, technically. The Raiders turned the ball over 3 times, and Minshew was under constant pressure, getting hit 6 times and sacked 4. They couldn't establish a running game either, but still, how did this happen? There was a crucial moment when the Raiders were in Chargers territory on a 4th and 1. Instead of going for it, they decided to punt with about 7 minutes left. Sure, they had their timeouts and hoped to get the ball back, but the offense hadn't been doing much all game. When you're that close, you've got to trust your playmakers, guys like Davante Adams, to make something happen. But instead, they gave the ball back to the Chargers, who had been running all over them in the second half. And what happened? The Chargers drove down the field in just 5 plays. Now, let's talk about Antonio Pierce. I love the guy. He's brought a fresh culture to the team. I get that he's cautious, especially with Gardner Minshew at quarterback instead of Aiden O'Connell, who he sees as the future. But some of the decisions were just puzzling. It's clear he doesn't fully trust Luke Getsy or the offense. The Raiders couldn't convert on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, so Pierce probably thought they wouldn't even be able to pick up a yard. It's just embarrassing because the Chargers, while talented and led by a great coach in Jim Harbaugh, shouldn't have dominated up front like that. The Raiders' defense was lights out in the first half, but in the second half, they completely disappeared. They allowed 158 rushing yards in the second half alone compared to just 83 total yards in the first half. It was a complete collapse. And Max Crosby, when have we ever seen him get shut down like that one-on-one? This loss hurts, guys. The Raiders need to figure things out fast. I can't remember the last time I saw something like this. Joe Al, a rookie, completely dominated Max Crosby. And while Joe Al isn't some no-name player, he looks like he's going to be one of the top tackles in the league for years. Max just had no answer for him. That was tough to watch. On the flip side, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa were causing all kinds of chaos. Bosa was everywhere, making plays, including one where he dove and forced a fumble. Mack had a sack, and Bosa added one too. Mack even recovered a fumble. Meanwhile, Gardner Minshew just didn't look good in this game. I'm not feeling confident about him at all. By the way, for those who don't know, I'm not even a Raiders fan. I love making Raiders videos for you guys, but I'm actually a Colts fan. One of the few bright spots yesterday was not having to see Minshew as my team's quarterback, and it's not that he's awful. He's a decent backup quarterback, but that's just it. He's a backup for a reason. He can come in when the starter is hurt and maybe win you a few games, but your ceiling isn't very high with him. In this game, Minshew completed 25 passes for 257 yards with a touchdown and an interception. That pick was pretty bad too. A defensive lineman got him, but honestly, this loss wasn't all on Minshew. Sure, he didn't play great, but he was under constant pressure, getting hit 6 times and sacked 4, and there was no run game to support him. 22 carries for just 71 yards. Here's the thing. I came into this season believing in the Raiders. I thought they'd make the playoffs and even be a sneaky contender. My reasoning, I figured the defense would be solid and they'd run the ball effectively. When you run well, it opens up play action, and that's where guys like Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and Brock Bowers can really shine. On paper, this is a very talented football team, but yesterday they ran for just 71 yards on 22 carries. The Chargers' front, especially their interior line, was tough to handle. Even the edge defenders were making life difficult for the Raiders. This was one of those games they should have won, but they didn't. I'm going to have to go back and watch the film, but right now I'm not feeling too optimistic. I'm not saying the season's over. I still believe the Raiders will win some games, then I'm going to keep making Raiders content for you guys. But scoring just 10 points against the Chargers and giving up 158 rushing yards in the second half alone, that's concerning. What's the ceiling for this team with Luke Getsy and Gardner Minshew running the offense? You need to score points in the NFL, and I'm just not sure how well the Raiders can move the ball right now. Looking ahead, the Raiders have a chance to bounce back, and it's a big one. Their next game is against the Ravens in Baltimore. Now, I don't think the Raiders need to win that game to prove themselves, but if they can compete and keep it close, it would definitely restore some optimism. However, if they manage to pull off a win in Baltimore, that could completely change the narrative around this team. It's worth noting that Gardner Minshew did pull off an upset against the Ravens with the Colts last year, so it's not impossible. After that, the schedule looks favourable for the Raiders. They have games at home against the Panthers and Browns, followed by matchups against Denver, Pittsburgh, and the Rams. These are all winnable games. Looking even further ahead, they face Kansas City, Cincinnati, Miami, Denver again, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, and Jacksonville. This is a relatively soft schedule, which is why I initially had the Raiders making the playoffs. I still think they're a better team than a lot of their upcoming opponents, but this loss against the Chargers should serve as a wake up call. The Raiders need to take a hard look at themselves and figure out what they need to do to start winning games consistently. Honestly, losing to a divisional rival always stings, and this game didn't offer much to be encouraged about. The Chargers didn't play exceptionally well, but they found a way to win, relying on their defense and run game. Justin Herbert didn't have a huge game, but the Chargers were the more physical team, which was supposed to be the Raiders' strength this year. Physicality and discipline. Unfortunately, that just wasn't there. It's only week one, so I don't want to overreact too much, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned. This was the kind of game you don't want to see from your team. Turnovers, constant pressure on the quarterback, giving up big yards on the ground, and collapsing in the second half. And not going for it when you need just 1 yard? What kind of message does that send to your offensive coordinator and your team? The Raiders need to figure things out fast. Peace.